Hello. So I think I'm gonna make this my first public video, which is a bit scary because you never know who might watch it and start ridiculing it, but I will just have to take that as it comes. I've been planning to make this video for a while, just about, a lot of people do symptom run-throughs of borderline personality disorder. And so it's not going to be a straightforward one of those because you can find them anywhere, but I'm going to make it more personalised. And I've been doing some sort of reading through stuff online, including things from the American Psychiatric Association and the Archives of Psychiatry and Psychotherapy and various other sources from bits and bobs online and in books and stuff. So I've tried to get my head round what's going on at the moment with the diagnostic criteria, because they're very different. So excuse me if I look down at all my notes and stuff as I do the video, but I have no memory. So firstly, there are two main things that clinicians use to diagnose, and those are the DSM, which stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and the ICD, which is the International Classification of Diseases. The DSM is produced by a single national professional association. It's mostly used in the US and is approved by the American Psychiatric Association. It's generally sort of seen as a bit of a no-go in the UK, but I think most sources that I know seem to use their criteria. And the ICD is produced by a global health agency, so it's approved by the World Health Assembly, which is composed of health ministers from 193 of the World Health Organization member countries, so it's more of a combined effort. The DSM is sold and not as readily available as the ICD. The ICD tend to publish things online and they try and produce it and distribute it as widely as possible. At a low cost. The DSM-4 seems to consist of the most commonly used set of diagnostic criteria for BPD that I have seen. And this was updated sort of in the DSM-5. They proposed changes to the criteria for the new version, but they seem to have mostly stuck with their old one. But I'll go through that in a bit. They basically put them as a proposed set of changes for the next one in section 3. So they kind of stuck with what was in the edition before. But the next ICD, which is 11, appears to be proposing the idea of diagnosing just a personality disorder. So taking away the categories, so like borderline, antisocial, histrionic, personality disorder, etc. They wouldn't be any categories. You'd just diagnose a personality disorder, and then this is from me doing little reading, and I might have misinterpreted it, but it does look like they've revised and simplified it a lot. But it hasn't yet been approved, and it's scheduled to be released sort of early next year, from what I can tell. So the DSM seems to be the go-to for classifying mental disorders. The ICD seems to have taken a bit of a backseat to that, although the ICD is still the formal diagnostic system used globally, including in the US, supposedly. For now, classification seems to be quite unclear and very dependent on which source you use. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use the list that I most relate to, and the one that I find the most easy to run through and relate to, which is actually the one that they've put in section 3 of the new DSM-5. So they thought of changing the criteria in the new DSM. The thought and discussion went on for like 20 years or something, and it was published. The DSM was new one 5 was published in 2013, and as I said, they they were talking about this new series of ways of defining it and diagnosing it and whatever, but they decided to keep it much the same after all, and published it in section 3. However, at the same time, committees are meeting regarding updating the ICD in advance of publishing edition 11, and the last version of that was published in 1992, so it's been a long time since the last one was done. The ICD 11 appear to have gone for a much bolder approach than the DSM, who stuck mostly to their guns of the previous version. And they, as I said before, are thinking about diagnosing a personality disorder and then ranking it between no personality dysfunction and then personality difficulty and personality disorder. And if you diagnosed a personality disorder, it will be categorised as mild, moderate or severe. I'm not very keen on that idea, to be honest. But that's sort of what they think is going to be included in the new ICD. It's obviously more complex than that, but that's sort of what I can work out from the reading that I've done. So yeah, that's just a brief overview of what's going on. I'm gonna use the one that they obviously have turned down, or put in for further revision and study and whatever, in the DSM-5 section 3. So I'll just run through the criteria and run through any notes that I've made next to it. So it says the essential features of a personality disorder are impairments in personality, self and interpersonal functioning, and the presence of pathological personality traits. To diagnose personality disorder, the following criteria must be met. A. Significant impairments in personality functioning, manifest by 1. Impairments in self-functioning, and then there's 2 sections, there's A and B. The first one, A, is identity, and it says markedly impoverished, poorly developed or unstable self-image, often associated with excessive self-criticism, chronic feelings of emptiness, dissociative states under stress. So, what I've noted next to that for me is that, I mean, my self-image isn't necessarily unstable in that a lot of people seem to change who they are and what they think and whatever when they're with certain people. I think mine's quite stable in terms of things like that, but I'd struggle to know who I am at all, and I tend to cling to certain labels to define myself, such as being BPD and being a lesbian, and defining myself by what other people think of me, because I'm not sure who I am, and I always struggle with that sort of question. Obviously the chronic feelings of emptiness, that happens a lot. I'm often like lonely and whatever. Dissociative states under stress, so that's only happened to me a couple of times. I might have to pause this here in a second and do part 2. So that's happened to me a couple of times, but not severely like some people experience it. And I'm making a video. So that's happened a couple of times. One time when I was very stressed, my ex was going through a really, really rough time and was in hospital for her mental health. And I don't know if she was actually in at that time, but things were very, very stressful. And yeah, some people dissociate to quite an extreme degree, where they don't remember what's happened and stuff. My sort of, I don't know if you can even call it dissociation, was more like I didn't feel like I was real. I kind of felt like I was dreaming. I wasn't really there. It was mostly real confusion and not feeling like, I felt like I was kind of in a dream. And that's happened maybe twice, so it's pretty rare. It's not something that I struggle with generally. And then B is self-direction. So that's instability in goals, aspirations, values, or career plans. I don't, again, tend to change between those things a lot. I don't decide, oh, I want to be an astronaut, now I want to be a teacher, I want to be, a policeman. It's more that I just have no idea. I have no idea what my goals are, if I have any. I don't know what I want to be, what I want to achieve, what I want to do. So I've kind of switched between. So I started wanting to be a primary school teacher, which changed just before I applied for my degree course, because I thought, oh no, I don't know if I want to do that. So I did something more general. And now I'm not working with children at all. I'm working in the NHS. I'm working with people who work with children, but I'm kind of an admin now, which plays to my strengths, but it isn't the career choice that I would have gone for. But I don't know what that is. I don't know what I'd love to do. I don't know if there is anything that I really, really want to do. If I have any strict goals. There's just general things that I think, oh, I'm going to regret that. But anyway, so it's more that I don't know what they are. And sometimes I think, oh, I want to do this. Like the other day I posted a status, a post in a group on Facebook, and I was writing about how I'd had a revelation and I wanted to work with children again because they make me happy. But there's so many different things involved in that I then, the next day can go, actually, no, it's not what I want to do. So that's that. And then there's, the next section is impairments in interpersonal functioning. And that's a two-parter as well. That's empathy, and it says compromised ability to recognise the feelings and needs of others associated with interpersonal hypersensitivity, i.e. being prone to feel insulted or slighted. Perceptions of others selectively biased towards negative attributes or vulnerabilities. So, here I've put that I am likely to take things personally and get upset more than other people, and that's even more if I'm in a bad mood already. Like little bits of sort of banter, if I'm in a good mood, I can handle. If I'm in a slightly worse mood or a bad mood, then that can feel like a punch in the stomach quite quickly. And that links in with like the section later that is about hostility, but I'll write that later. I'll talk about that later. I got my therapy notes recently, medical and therapy notes, and from those it kind of said that I appear critical of others quite frequently, which I hate. I hated that, because I worry about how I'm perceived in that case, because generally I don't think that that's what I'm like. I don't think that's in my character, but maybe it is. I'll pick up on negatives much more quickly in any situation than any possible positives. So maybe that extends to how people are being towards me. But on the other hand, it's not like I'm not empathetic at all, because I do tend to pick up on other people's negative emotions quite quickly. So in my group therapy, if someone's upset, or at work as well, if someone's upset or has some kind of negative feeling, I will generally notice that quite quickly, and sometimes more quickly than other people. And sometimes I'll end up soaking that up like a sponge, and I'll kind of take on their mood. And I can relate to people quite well generally, I think. So yeah, it's a bit of a complicated one, I suppose. And then, sorry, I've made way too many notes here. So, and then the second part is intimacy, and it says intense, unstable and conflicted close relationships marked by mistrust, neediness, and anxious preoccupation with real or imagined abandonment. Close relationships often viewed in extremes of idealization and devaluation, and alternating between over-involvement and withdrawal. So this is where splitting comes in, which you may have heard if you're familiar with BPD. I think basically, from what I can tell, splitting is like black and white thinking. So personally, I've had a lot of relationship issues with friends and partners. That doesn't so much extend to family normally, but they are a constant issue. Things are a bit calmer recently, but especially at university and stuff, it was a nightmare. I've had quite a significant pattern of relationships, romantic relationships, they tend to get very intense quite quickly, which is often a feature of a lesbian relationship anyway, stereotypically, but even more so because I've got BPD. And they have historically, got intense and then ended within like 3-4 months, normally by the other person. I've had 2 exceptions to that rule, and that was like the most recent one that I had, and then the first relationship, and they didn't follow that pattern at all. But I don't know if those are anomalies or if the last one was a sign of me getting better at them, or I'm really not sure. But it has been a pattern, one that I don't like. Where it says about neediness and anxious preoccupation with real or imagined abandonment, I am definitely needy, and I'm very aware that that is not an attractive quality to have, and it often tends to overwhelm people. I have that's another ongoing theme in terms of being over-reliant on other people, and that is something I constantly struggle with in my own head as well, because I'm so aware that I do it. So I constantly think about, I worry about doing it, and struggle between feeling too clingy and being needy, and on the other end of the scale, feeling isolated and like I cannot talk to anyone for various array of reasons. It goes kind of one extreme to the other, and we discussed that actually last week in my therapy session, 2 weeks ago. So maybe that would be brought up again. So I have like issues when people don't respond or speak to me for a long period of time, or even if it's a short period of time and they normally are better at responding, then I don't want to appear needy, because I worry that that's why they're not responding in the first place and that they've walked away. So I stop reaching out, and then I kind of assume that they've left for good and that they don't care about me. So although I don't consciously push people away in a sort of typical what you expect of BPD people, like just completely shut people out, I do kind of try and protect myself once I feel like they've already gone, and just kind of try and forget that they exist, which doesn't work very well, but I try to close them off as an option, because I feel like they've removed themselves anyway. And I suppose that goes with over-involvement and then withdrawal. So in with the black and white thinking, which I've previously described it as struggling with contradiction. So I tend to be someone who likes structure and procedure and rules, because it's clear cut and you know right and wrong. I make my own like manuals and stuff at work, and then I get people to read over them so that I know that I'm doing things right. And I can, because it helps my memory issues as well, because I then can go, well, this is what I did, I followed this exactly. It's in black and white, literally. So I get people to read over those who are in a position to approve it, and then when they approve it, it's fine. I feel better about doing it, and I don't have to get anxious that I'm doing it wrong. And then it infuriates me when people don't follow guidelines and people don't do things right, and then another thing is that if someone criticises something, I take that to mean that is bad. So, example lately, people criticising something I was wearing. So I thought, right, well, that item of clothing is bad. Fine, do not wear that. That's a bad item of clothing. But then when someone else compliments the same thing, I then end up like kind of stuck, and I'm like, well, it's either good or it's bad. Like, you can't, if they said it's bad and you're saying it's good and you like it, then it has to be one or the other. I don't understand. So I get kind of stuck, unable to handle the difference in opinion and not knowing which one to follow, and not being able to just go, most people go, well, some people don't like this thing and some people do, and I like it, so it's fine, I'll wear it. That was not where my head went with that situation. And then in terms of ideation and devaluation, I didn't think that I did this. I didn't realise that I was black and white at all until one of my friends, who probably knows me better than I do myself, pointed it out when I said that I didn't think that I suffered with black and white thinking, and she just laughed. Because clearly I'm very black and white. But I didn't realise it. I don't have an idea of my identity and who I am and what my personality is like. But I am very good at holding grudges, and I do tend to remember the negative things that people do. I don't know how much I devalue others, which is a really horrible term, actually. I really don't like the idea of doing that. But I would guess that I probably do. At least in their eyes and from what people have said to me. Yeah, I don't really want to think about that too much. And then there's another section of pathological personality traits in the following domains. 1. Negative affectivity, characterised by A. Emotional liability, unstable emotional experiences and frequent mood changes, emotions that are easily aroused, intense and or out of proportion to events and circumstances. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Moods can be very different, a range of different moods over the course of a day. And yeah, I'll often overreact to things that have happened. I get an email that could be read as slightly critical, and that's it. I'm in a bad mood, I'm going out for a cigarette, don't want to talk to anyone when I come back in. So it can be quite out of proportion, and a little comment or something, or I watch something or someone else in a bad mood and suddenly my whole mood changes. It's not stable generally at all. Sometimes it's stable, but normally that's if I'm really depressed. So that's not the best kind of stability. B, anxiousness. Intense feelings of nervousness, tenseness or panic, often in reaction to interpersonal stresses. Worry about the negative effects of past unpleasant experiences and future negative possibilities. Feeling fearful, apprehensive or threatened by uncertainty, fears of falling apart or losing control. So again, most of that is pretty self-explanatory. I don't generally worry about falling apart and losing control, because I never really consider myself to be unwell, and my therapist has learned not to use that word. We use struggling instead now. And I have never and will never be someone who needs to be hospitalised for my mental health. But on the other hand, I do fear my mental health getting worse and being unable to cope or hide how things are from certain people, being signed off work and things like that, because that happened earlier in the year. So I worry more about that sort of thing. And then get on the right page on my notes would help. Separation insecurity, fears of rejection by and or separation from significant others, associated with fears of excessive dependency and complete loss of autonomy. So yeah, I kind of discussed this before, but yeah, I do also often worry about being too needy, particularly in regards to being abandoned. I don't massively fear a loss of autonomy, though. If I thought about it, I'm sure I could, but I don't think I do. Uh, and maybe that's because I don't know that I have it in the first place. I don't know. Then depressivity. Frequent feelings of being down, miserable and or hopeless, difficulty recovering from such moods, pessimism about the future, pervasive shame, feelings of inferior self-worth, thoughts of suicide and suicidal behaviour. So, again, I mean, most of this is pretty self-explanatory, but pessimism about the future. So, for example, I'm pretty convinced that I'm going to be, if I make it to being an old lady, I'll be laying there on my deathbed and I will regret wasting my life. I'm pretty convinced that that's true. So yeah, I worry that, I won't ever be happy, I suppose. But I don't think I'll ever be the person that I want to be. And a lot of that is because I don't know who I want to be. But it isn't this. Yep, low self-esteem, self-worth. That's always been a thing since I basically started secondary school. Thoughts of suicide and suicidal behaviour kind of comes with the territory of mental health, I think, for quite a lot of people. So I have never made a serious suicide attempt. I have taken overdoses and things, but I have never made an attempt where I thought I was actually going to die. I think that the will's been there and the thoughts are there a lot, but the fear holds me back from doing anything, and the thought of family and certain friends and stuff. And I suppose there must be a tiny shred of hope in there somewhere. This kind of leads into the next one, which is disinhibition, which is characterised by impulsivity, acting on the spur of the moment in response to immediate stimuli, acting on a momentary basis without a plan or consideration of outcomes, difficulty establishing or following plans, a sense of urgency and self-harming behaviour under emotional distress. And then risk-taking, engagement in dangerous, risky and potentially self-damaging activities, unnecessarily and without regard to consequences, lack of concern for one's limitations and denial of the reality of personal danger. So, I am not generally a risk taker. As I said before, I like rules, I like structure, I like doing the right thing. Like yesterday I was out with a friend and I didn't even want to sit on some seats outside a pub because we weren't there, we weren't buying anything. So that was wrong. That was the wrong thing to do, and I didn't want to do that. So generally not a risk taker. But in certain mind frames, that goes out the window. Especially the bit that resonated with me was the denial of the reality of personal danger. So that to me is where my, if you can call them suicide attempts, come in. Because there has been one or two incidences where I've taken too much of a medication, and although I didn't think I was going to die, I wasn't really bothered. And I kind of assumed that it'll be fine, and I didn't get checked out. And I did have some symptoms that I probably should have been checked out for. But it doesn't, yeah, that says it all. The denial of the reality of personal danger. I have done silly things like walking around at stupid o'clock in the morning by myself in the dark in a pair of heels, drinking and taking pills along the way and walking a couple of miles, like self-harming. That's something that I've been doing since I was about 14. So yeah. That comes in with like spending habits and things like that as well. I will blow loads of money and not care until afterwards. And I know that I'm going to, have to suffer with it afterwards, but I don't care at that point. the other bit is antagonism, characterized by hostility, persistent or frequent angry feelings, anger or irritability in response to minor slights and insults. So I found this to be worse recently. Generally, I've had a problem with anger, but not in terms of being an explosive borderline, which is what most people expect, but being someone who doesn't know what to do with their anger. It's quite frequently ended up being internalized. If I get angry, I have historically self-harmed or something like that, because I don't know what to do when I feel actual anger. I tend to be more irritable. My anger kind of tends to come out as irritation, passive aggression, which is never good, and then the very British sort of sighing and tutting and so yeah, I am not very good with anger. I also don't react well to other people's anger. It scares me, and there's no real reason for that. So yeah, strange. Then the last bits are the impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are relatively stable across time and consistent across situations. So yeah, I'd go with that. I tend to be pretty much the same at work, at home, in my friendships. Even back to when I was in school, my issues kind of started to develop or show themselves when I was about 14 or 15. Then the impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are not better understood as normative for the individual's development stage or socio-cultural environment. So no, they're not normal. It's nothing to do with the way that I was raised, from what I can tell, my environment or anything like that. And the last one is the impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are not solely due to the direct physiological effects of a substance, e.g. Drug of abuse or medication, and or a general medical condition, for example, a severe head injury. So no, I have not had any of those things. So yeah, that was just kind of a brief overview and kind of talking about how I relate to that list of symptoms. If anyone has any questions, feel free to leave me a comment or send a message or whatever, and I will try and get back to you. I hope this has been a little bit helpful. Take care.